The Prince, written by Niccolò Machiavelli, is a political work in which he basically overs how to acquire, maintain, and keep a principality. Um, I first went into this thinking that Machiavellian ideas were to take power at any cost, as he was this cutthroat sort of guy. I honestly watched things that disprove these thoughts, but also I think it was best I read it for myself. I also saw some people saying this is a parody work, which I don't know if it's true because I have not read his other works, but I will say this book actually contains some valuable ideas. Um, for my recommendation, I think it was really interesting to me, and I think you could find valuable ideas in it, but I don't know. I wouldn't really recommend it unless you're into like political strategies or um, political work overall. Yeah. For my personal rating, I'd probably give it like a 4. It was very interesting to me. I just had a hard time like combing through it. I think these are some interesting quotes from the book. Some of them are more like excerpts, but some of them are kind of direct quotes. Uh, he who builds on the people builds on the mud, which is to say, like, if you build on the people, you will not have a strong foundation, meaning, kind of a weak foundation. The next is men precede imitation. And I think he was talking about kind of how men often follow in this path where they imitate someone great in order to be great. Imitate those who have been outstanding. Great men imitate great men. This is not always the case. He also says you have to have the prowess in order to imitate a great man. Yeah, and then armor belonging to someone else often weighs you down. He's talking about David and Goliath here, where David does not accept the armor from the king in order to defeat Goliath. You become poor in practicing generosity. This is kind of him saying when he's talking about certain qualities that a prince should have, and you need to be prepared to act in a non-virtuous way. Practicing generosity doesn't always lead to the intended outcome. Men must either be pampered or crushed because they can set revenge for small injuries but not grievous ones. This kind of first section is acquiring and maintaining power. Um, Principalities are easier to maintain if inherited. They come with a well established structure, meaning you have a good foundation to build your own principality off because it was already set. But then you also obviously need the prowess to maintain that, well established structure. New territories built on older ones face difficulties, opposition, and hardships. So this one is kind of talking about how when the older inhabitants, you know, are trying to block innovation for their own benefit, and the defense of the new territory is not as strong as the attack on it. Gaining favor of inhabitants is crucial, otherwise you risk losing control. Because the dissatisfied, they will bring the enemy. You won't have the arms to defend against said enemies because you no longer have the inhabitants in your favor. Language, customs, and settlements can aid in maintaining new possessions. Settlements can often aid in maintaining kind of the new inhabitants, as well as you just living there and kind of having these people to speak the language of them, as well as kind of pass it on, as well as your new customs. At the start of a state, know all injuries you'll need to inflict, so revenge will not be something you fear. Yeah, so basically, be prepared to inflict all that injury all at once. It won't come back onto you. Rule securely by preserving freedom or completely destroying resistance. He talks about destruction a lot. I'll get to that in a second, but he does talk about that a lot. Settlements are preferable to maintaining military presence for cost efficiency. Strong foundations are essential for stability, which I think I said before. With the citizens and nobles, you want to make sure they're dependent on you because then they're less likely to want to inflict injury onto you. This is kind of the part that was most interesting to me, and it's the role of cruelty. To some degree, I do think there is a necessity for cruelty to prevent more suffering. He says this, you want this because you don't want more crime because you did nothing, basically. Uh, Cruelty should be used decisively and sparingly for long term stability. That is good cruelty in quotations. Good cruelty done once for safety and stability. Bad cruelty is persistent, increasing over time. So basically, you use more and more cruelty, um, and basically the inhabitants will come to hate you because of said cruelty. Destruction of opposition is often the most efficient way to ensure security. So, yeah, again, he talks about this destruction a lot, which is a good way to protect yourself. It's not the only way, it is simply the most efficient way to protect yourself from any possible threat of revenge. You'll be opposed by those you injured. It's better be feared than loved if one cannot be both, but you want both. You kind of want this to be respected. To exactly be too feared, but you also don't want to be too admired, because that can lead to bad things. And although it doesn't really matter about being feared or loved, you want to avoid being hated. And in order to do that, you want to not take citizens' property, nor do you want to dishonor them. So, yeah. Also, compassion is valuable, but must not lead to permissiveness. So basically, you want to be compassionate, but you also don't want it to lead people to taking advantage of you. Fear can ensure loyalty without enticing hatred. That's key point there. I also like the kind of the part about leadership where he's talking about the prowess of a prince and how it should be maintained in order to keep power, and how a lot of these princes come into power through fortune, but in order to maintain the fortune, you need prowess to sustain the fortune that came with it. Prince must be flexible, virtuous when possible, pragmatic when necessary. So basically saying you want to have this outward look of being virtuous, but you also want to be realistic and when it is necessary. And then he also talks about generosity and parsimony. A reputation for either can lead to trouble. Being generous doesn't guarantee rewards, and being miserly ensures you take nothing when needed. Hold wealth wisely for your benefit and others. Basically teaches good qualities can be harmful and bad qualities can be helpful, depending on how you look at it and how you use it. You know, appear virtuous while being ready to act contrary to virtue if required, basically. But you can also appear to have another characteristic. He also says that isn't necessarily detrimental to you, depending on what it is. He also said you want to reflect on who helped you and why, because some people may help you for their own interests, such as nobles. They may have put you in that position for their own benefit. Honesty in appropriate measures. You want to be honest at certain times, but you may want to be prepared to be dishonest so that you do not fall a fool. You want to be a questioner, patient, and listener. Next is managing people and power structures. This is kind of shorter. Prince must ensure the populace and nobles remain loyal and dependent, which I've spoken about before. Yeah, it's really important that you make sure that they're dependent on you, so that they have something to lose. If said something happens, they would fight for your security as well as theirs. People desire security and freedom from oppression, while nobles seek exactly that. They seek the power to oppress, the freedom, which is something that the people desire. So basically, you kind of want to meet in the middle, but you don't want to oppress the people. So just don't take their property. And then he also says women, but it doesn't matter. Basically keeping everyone fat and happy, or at least make them think they are. That's what I said. You want to rely on personal judgment and advice of a trusted view. So basically, it talks about having these people that these chosen people that you choose to listen to. But you want to avoid flatterers and seek honest counsel, because otherwise you'll have just yes men without anybody telling you actually good advice. And sort of last thing here, you want to balance being kind of spontaneous and kind of just jumping the gun with also thinking about your decisions and reflecting, because sometimes it's good to just go and make a quick decision, but you also need to prepare to calm down and make a kind of thoughtful decision. This last part was the most boring for me, so there's very little notes here compared to the rest or the other sections. This is kind of the warfare and defense. A prince must master the art of war in peace and conflict. So basically, be prepared to have the mental stability and preparedness for peace and conflict, because often conflict comes in times of peace. So you don't want to be lacking then. In order to help this, military exercises Physical and mental should be constant so that you're always prepared. While unpopular strengthens the state and ensures loyalty. Basically, mercenaries and auxiliaries are unreliable and dangerous, so you want a well-armed populace, and the kind of this self-sufficient military, because this in terms of long-term security and independence, because you're relying on your own military. Yeah, I feel like those were kind of the key ideas and kind of the ones that were interesting to me. There are obviously other things in the notes. I kind of went over obviously what I took from it. There's also some other things that I took out my notes because I felt were less important than these things. So yeah, if you guys, I think you recommend I recommend going to read the book and making your own opinion. But these were kind of my takeaways from it, and yeah, Prince by Machiavelli.